A lot of people here in India are making all kinds of allegations, including saying that this is the hypocrisy of the West, that you don't really care for our terror concerns, us in the third world.
Yeah, I mean, I ask for your understanding that I cannot comment on individual cases, but the principle is, again, that Interpol has a kind of limited mandate.
And with that, we bring you other top stories we've been tracking all over the globe in World in a Minute. Australia's southeastern region is submerged under floodwater as emergency warnings remain in place. Hundreds of people have been rescued and one person has lost his life in Rochester, near Melbourne. A juvenile shooter killed 5 people along a walking trail in North Carolina's capital city, Raleigh. An off-duty police officer was among those killed. The suspect has been arrested, but his identity remains concealed. And Elon Musk is under a federal investigation related to his $44 billion takeover deal for Twitter. While the filing said he was under investigation, it did not say what the investigation's focus was. Musk has not tweeted or commented on this matter. And that's all I have for you in this edition of World 360. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back same time next week. Do stay tuned to CNN News 18.
That was clearly visible yesterday when Shashi Tharoor arrived at Patna airport. None of the senior leaders went to receive him. In fact, when he came to the Sadakat Ashram, the historic Sadakat Ashram where the meeting was held, none of the leaders were there too. So whatever the allegation Shashi Tharoor is making was clearly, it could be seen there when he arrived and he left Patna in 2 hours. So at that point of time, no senior leaders from Bihar State Congress was there accompanying him, or rather sat with him in any of the officers' chamber. So the allegations made by him that he's being neglected, he's not being welcomed or treated well by the senior leaders of the state could be seen yesterday, and that was the reason that he in fact in his interview said that although the ideologies of Mr. Kharge and him matched, it was the same ideologies that they were carrying, but the mode of working in the party were different. What he said that his mode of working in the party is different than Mr. Kharge.
Amid Shashi Tharoor's allegations of favoritism that he made while speaking exclusively to CNN News 18, Congress presidential candidate Mallikarjun Kharge has now joined the Bharat Jodo Yatra. Now remember, today is actually the last day of campaigning for the polls, as voting takes place on the 17th. Today, the Yatra has also completed 1,000 kilometers, a big milestone, and a big rally is being planned in Bellary to celebrate. Now, let's listen in to that exclusive chat that we had with Shashi Tharoor.
There is an uneven level playing ground for you as compared to Mr. Kharge, and also the senior leaders seems biased in your campaigning. What do you have to say on this?
Look, there's no question that in most states, though not Madhya Pradesh where I was earlier today, but in most states it's true that the senior leaders have rallied behind Mr. Kharge, and I don't blame them. Every individual has a right to support whom they want to, but in the process of doing that, they've also discouraged other voters from attending my
everyone, you're watching A Billion Ideas with me, Maria Shakil, this Saturday. Just this week, a two-judge bench of the Supreme Court delivered a split verdict on a batch of petitions challenging the Karnataka High Court judgment, refusing to lift the ban on hijab in educational institutions of the state. Justice Hemant Gupta dismissed all the petitions and maintained the status quo over the hijab ban in educational institutions, claiming it was not an essential religious practice in Islam, adding that such administrative decisions, namely in educational institutions, do not violate fundamental rights. He took the line of the Karnataka High Court, which ruled that the prescription of a uniform is a reasonable restriction. On the other hand, Justice Sudhanshu Dhulia ruled that wearing a hijab was ultimately a matter of choice. He also said that asking girls to take off their hijabs for access to education was an attack on their privacy and dignity. The status quo remains in effect, and the Chief Justice of India will now constitute a fresh bench with 3 or more judges to hear the matter. But this debate in India is in stark contrast to the scenes emerging from Iran and the global outrage over the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini last month. She died in the custody of the morality police for the crime of not wearing her hijab properly, just that much. Protests continue in Iran with solidarity marches and messages from around the globe. Hundreds of women have taken to social media to cut their hair and burn hijabs, calling the attire a tool of oppression. The Iranian regime's crackdown has been merciless, targeting and killing many young women, leading the agitation, and even clamping down on the internet to contain the news and visuals of the protests from spreading around the globe. Two nations with two distinct realities, the common thread being Islam. Today we decode the question the world is debating. The whole world is debating. Can a symbol of faith truly be a matter of choice for women if it is also used to oppress? Can a hijab truly be a symbol of religious agency if it is also used as a tool of subjugation? Let me take those two questions to the panelists joining me on A Billion Ideas. Dr. Zeenat Shaukat Ali is the director of Wisdom Foundation, joining me from Mumbai. We have Mursal Noorzai, an activist, joining me from Munich. Barzeen Wagmar is professor at the Center for Iranian Studies at SOAS. She's just joining me from London. We have Zakia Soman, women's rights activist. Zakia, Supreme Court's split verdict has again put the focus on essential religious practice. If it is not an essential religious practice, then why should hijab be allowed in schools, particularly when the focus is uniformity?
So, two things, Maria. We all know that hijab is not an essential practice of Islam. We know it is not mandatory in Islam. And we also know that it is a patriarchal imposition. But at the same time, what we are talking about here is the right to education, which is a fundamental right for the girls. And we have not a theocracy like Iran. We are a liberal democracy with a constitution which gives equal rights to citizens, which prioritizes education, particularly for the girl child.
Yes.
And our constitution has a spirit which is about inclusion, which is about compassion, which is about kindness to the marginalized citizen, which here is the girl child. So to take away her, right to attend school, to deny her entering the classroom is not correct. And that is what is the bone of contention here. And I
but
think
Zakia, the question again is that when you enter school, it is about scientific temper. It is about ensuring that the clothes that you wear or your attire doesn't come in the way of seeking knowledge or seeking education. And if you look at the larger debate around hijab, if it is not an essential religious practice, then why should it be pushed the manner in which it was done in Karnataka? Particularly given the background that we know of it, Dr. Zeenat Shaukat Ali, that the entire anti-hijab protests were engineered and manufactured by the Popular Front of India here? Dr. Zeenat Shaukat Ali.
First, I would like to say that we stand in complete solidarity with the extraordinary women of Iran in the outgoing struggle against the state imposition of hijab, where women have been put, where their lives have been put at stake. So that's the first submission I'd like to make. Also, see this hijab issue, one has to look at it as a deployment of state power for uniformity. That is a larger question arising out of this debate, and it is how both in Iran and in India, how do we deal with difference and with dissent? So here we have to start with that. And the two judgments that have come up, one is dealing with education and, as I already mentioned, constitutional propriety and, sympathy and liberalism towards Muslim girls, whereas the other is dealing with citizenship and taking a stronger view and supporting the High Court judgment. Now, the first thing is that, and Justice Dhulia is talking about diversity and the celebration. And the time is to explore and to experiment and not to get alarmed, but to celebrate, diversity. Now, I think, there are some views here, understandings here, which, that though Justice Dhulia's, with all due respect, views are in consonance with constitutional values, but if the larger bench concur with this, would it effectively strengthen the patriarchal forces and strengthen the rigid, retrogressive
Absolutely.
forces within the
My
community?
point is that if there are minors, we are looking at minors here who are under the age of 18, if they are wearing hijab, which is clearly being pushed by patriarchal values, then how can it be seen as choice? Mursal, we are seeing two different debates. Of course, one is Islamic Republic of Iran, where women are forced to wear hijab from the age of 7, girls, I would say, and thereafter this fight against hijab. This is a fight, a movement, a rebellion which is being led by women in Iran. Would you say that it is not really a choice then in a secular country such as ours? Because if it is used as a tool of oppression in one country, it cannot be seen as choice in another.
Thank you for having me. I have a very, this topic is a global discussion.
Yes.
This is a global discussion. And to my view, now we often talk about the immigrants, or we often talk about the minorities in this world. To my eye, woman has become a minority to this world, where we are not finding a safe place to choose what we want to do, to wear what we want to wear, and to decide whether or not we should take education, get education, dress the way we want, vote the way we want, do abortions or do not do abortions. So with that said, to my eye, it's very different. It's very, there. India and Iran, there are two different countries with their own set of constitutions. Now, to my eye, I agree with the educational uniformity. I think in an education center, university, school, and when we are talking about the minors under 18 who have lack of understanding of what hijab means. What is the meaning of hijab? Is it just a piece of cloth that you're covering your body? Or does it has a broader meaning? So it's very important in any religion, the things that's being followed or have been done, or the way, the things that we do, that we understand the meaning of it before we practically practice
and that
so
is
I'm
why,
not pro or
Mursal,
against
I'm just trying to understand, Mursal. If it is not an essential religious practice, if Islam talks about 5 principles or 5 pillars and hijab is not one of them, then who really brought hijab? I'm sure women would not have said, let's cover our head. And you know, that is a male addition or a patriarchal addition to what was seen as empowerment of women for the longest time. I'm going to stick to one word, and the first word in Quran, which is Iqra, which is about education, which is clearly saying that education is priority. And if education is priority in Quran and education is the primary thing in Quran, go seek education, go to China. That is what the meaning was in those days when Quran was, when people started reading Quran. Then shouldn't education be priority over hijab is my limited point. Barzeen, here are women of Iran saying clearly enough is enough, that they cannot be forced, to decide, that the Islamic Republic of Iran cannot be telling them what to wear. We are also seeing what has happened, that this entire transition, almost like moving towards Stone Age, that has happened in Afghanistan, ever since Taliban regime took over. Clothes are symbolic of the patriarchal push. That is what has happened, and that's why women in these two countries are pushing back. Here in India, it's a different story altogether. But what is seen, again I'm using the same question, what is seen as a tool of oppression in one country cannot be seen as choice or empowerment in another. Barzeen.
First things first, yeah, we are looking at extraordinary scenes coming out of Iran, Maria, where you have Generation Z as they are, the Dashte Hashtadi as they are known, who are young, online, brazen and undeterred. We are talking about a country and a population, that is to say 68.3% of Iranians are between the age of 15 and 64, which obviously an aging, retrograde, obscurantist patriarchy led by mullahs cannot control, or at least they have controlled so far in a highly securitized environment and what has been a police state since 1979 and the Islamic Revolution. But of course, it has really spiraled this time, and what we see is hitherto unseen before. 5,500 have been detained, youth, that is to say. 144 is the latest official count of deaths, but it's much higher, although Amnesty adduces 144, of which 23 are children. And as if that isn't enough for the regime to handle, they have gone and bombed Erbil in northern Iraq next door and Kurdish minorities there, blaming them for their problems back home, as if blaming a Sunni minority by what is an unabashedly Shia theocracy would sort things out. And they have also persecuted and detained their own Sunni Baloch minority in southeast Iran. None of this helps in deflection. Only a day or two ago, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, Maria, put up a massive billboard in downtown Tehran, "This is my land," with montages of women in hijabs, as if to show for a push of hijab by a regime which wants to advocate it. Massive protests took place. The regime had to pull it off, including Parvaneh Kazemi, who is a mountaineer, very famous Iranian mountaineer, who has even summited Everest, who stood up and said, "Not in my name." So protests are occurring across Iran with not just Shia and Sunni women, but all women, all students, and the regime is having a tough time. President Raisi was booed out by female students at the university last week because he dared to compare these protesters to flies and, relegate them to the level of flies. But of course, he was booed out and not allowed to finish his speech.
Barzeen, are you seeing this clearly as a turning point? Because the nature in which that these protests are not limited to just Tehran or campuses, it's spreading across. And are these women of Iran getting support from the men in their family? Or are the men of the opinion that what has been done by the Islamic Republic is the way forward?
Yes, very much so. Men are supporting. Maria, if you see scenes on TikTok and other videos that have been smuggled out, because of course the internet has taken a toll in Iran, as you can imagine, with the authorities, thanks to, of course, Chinese surveillance methods being deployed and appropriated by the Iranian intelligence and security agencies, and have been streamlined into Iran since 2009, when the aborted Green movement took place and these revolts took place and were heavily clamped down. So thanks to Chinese surveillance measures, they have a lot in place. The question of turning point is this: would the military snap? I don't see that happening as we speak currently. Because do remember, there's a lot of regime stalwarts invested in maintaining the status quo, maintaining what is the current Islamic Republic. And of course, they have no problem in seeing and shooting their own population in cold blood, which they've been doing, and shooting Kurds across the border. And missiles and drones have been landing in Erbil, northern Iraq, as I just mentioned. And of course, Iran supplying drones to Russia to kill Ukrainians.
Yes.
So it's like the Chinese regime. They have no qualms and compunction in killing their own or others.
Yes,
But
and is this also an attempt in many ways to tell women to show their place? Because women in general are supposed to be following patriarchal norms, be it in the form of it being bracketed as essential religious practice or by the state itself, which has become an oppressor here. Zakia Soman, the point here in India is also about institutional autonomy versus religious rights. But again, if it is not an essential religious practice, then shouldn't it be seen from the point of accommodation? That when you register yourself at a school where hijab is not part of the uniform, then you respect that and respect that as reasonable restriction and not push for it.
So I would expect the education institution to behave very differently from the way clergy behaves or orthodox religious community behaves. Precisely because it is an education institution, they have a temper of scientific thinking, they have a temper of learning, they have a temper of facilitating greater kind of, access for the girls. So looking at the realities of the girls, the social realities, they come from such conservative backgrounds. Many of them come from poverty, and all of them are under the stranglehold of patriarchal clergy.
Yes.
So by barring them from coming to school, we are pushing them further into the clutches of patriarchy. We are increasing the chances, the possibilities of patriarchal stranglehold in their lives. So the education institution should have that kind of a farsightedness.
Okay, but Zakia Soman, when we look at what you're saying, the scientific temper or educational institutions being far more accommodative, the counter argument can be that if the parents of these girls understand fully well where they are sending their children, Zeenat Shaukat Ali, for education, for seeking knowledge, if they understand that particular institution has certain norms, has a uniform, shouldn't that be respected then? Shouldn't they be more accommodative and not push for their patriarchal oppression?
I completely agree with you that you see when you enter a school, there is a form, there's a norm which you fill in and you know what you're heading for, the parents know and the
because social cultural activities in schools are prohibited. There are certain limitations of what is allowed, what is not allowed in a school premise. Shouldn't that be also a priority then?
I think, yes, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. That should be the priority. But you see, today what is happening is that, the clergy cutting across denominations is enforcing its view that the hijab is mandatory. So, and you see, that has become the matter of concern that you see young girls, where is the matter of choice for a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old girl who's brought up to think in that way?
Absolutely.
Where the parents, where there's a patriarchal understanding that this is, how you are supposed to be, and this is the B end and the D end of your life.
Yes, so for a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old, if it is not a choice,
it is not a choice.
It is not a choice. If it is a tool that they are told that you are expected to behave this way, then that's where my argument rests.
No,
that is where my argument rests. So that their parents cannot be then looking at education, seeking education in an institution where hijab is not allowed. So by pushing, then they cannot push the space, which is their personal homes, what is allowed, what is not allowed in their personal spaces, to outside as well. So they are in fact, that patriarchal push is only getting increased. Barzeen, I have just enough time for you.
Very briefly, Maria.
Yes.
Muslim women's bodies have become sites of patriarchal political contestation
Yes.
and an aggressive minorityism which is being played out whether in India or also just now as I speak in France, in Nanterre, in public schools, where parents are refusing to send girls in uniforms and boys but insist that they go wearing the Arab abaya and the thobe. The question of a uniform has to come in, and in France, which is unabashedly a secular state, where a confessionalism has no place in public life, but an aggressive minorityism is pushing the envelope and trying to garner so-called privileges where none ought to be existent and cannot be afforded to any and all citizens in the name of egalitarianism.
Point well taken. Mursal, we are seeing very passionate visuals come in from Iran. And the message is enough, and finally no means no. Would you say the time has come also for all those who were seen so far as reformist voices in the Arab world to stand up for women in Iran?
I think there's no right or wrong time, but I'm very happy that this is happening. This should have not been happened before. Anyways, pushing women and setting boundaries for women and in a sense discriminating them from the society, whether or not they should wear certain ways or hijab or not hijab. This topic is actually mentally oppressing a lot of women around the world. And this is, yes, happily a time that a lot of the women globally are coming together and discussing the topic. This is a positive sign that it's not acceptable anymore to put women in a position where they have to sacrifice their choices. And at the end of the day, to think if we are forced to, as a woman, if we are forced to do certain things, then it's not a choice, then it's just following the set of rules made by certain societies, religions around the globe.
All right, on that note, thank you so much for joining me, Mursal Noorzai Barzin. A pleasure to have you on my show today. Zakia Soman and Dr. Zeenat Shaukat Ali, thank you. That's all from me. I'll be seeing you next week with another episode of A Billion Ideas.
That he made while speaking exclusively to CNN News 18, Congress presidential candidate Mallikarjun Kharge has now joined the Bharat Jodo Yatra. Now remember, today is actually the last day of campaigning for the polls as voting takes place on the 17th. Today, the Yatra has also completed 1,000 kilometers, a big milestone, and a big rally is being planned in Bellary to celebrate. Now, let's listen in to that exclusive chat that we had with Shashi Tharoor.
There is an uneven level playing ground for you as compared to Mr. Kharge, and also the senior leaders seems biased in your campaigning. What do you have to say on this?
Look, there's no question that in most states, though not Madhya Pradesh where I was earlier today, but in most states it's true that the senior leaders have rallied behind Mr. Kharge, and I don't blame them. Every individual has a right to support whom they want to, but in the process of doing that, they've also discouraged other voters from attending my event. There is a visible difference between the way in which one candidate is received and treated and where the other candidate is. Now, I don't mind. At the end of the day, we both have to turn to the same electorate, and we have to get votes from whoever is persuaded by our arguments. I intend to do my best to get the message out to everybody. But there's no question that there are discrepancies in some of the lists. There are some real challenges and problems. So I'm batting on a pitch with very uneven bounds. But since I'm here to play a game, I'm there to play it whatever the conditions of the pitch. As far as I'm concerned, we're all colleagues. We're all working in the same party. And I've often said that whether Mr. Kharge wins or I win, what matters is the victory of the party. The party has to come out of this stronger, refreshed and re-energized. I find, and I've argued for some time now, that internal elections, when they become public as this one has become, undoubtedly have a role in not just galvanizing the workers, but in drawing the interest of the electorate. And that's why I'm saying, listen, the time has come for us to renew our own faith in ourselves, in what we believe, in what we stand for, and in what we have to fight for in our country. We have a very different idea of India from the BJP's, and I think it's important to understand that our vision of an inclusive India is something that we have to put forward with a great deal of conviction. We have to do it in a spirit which indicates that, very frankly, we understand where the internal deficiencies are, we're able to remedy them, we're able to energize our workers and give them a sense of ownership of the party, and with all of that, we're in a position to proceed confidently and courageously in the future.
It is also said that it is a contest not against Mr. Kharge, but it is a contest against those who don't want you to win.
That's for you to say. As far as I'm concerned, we're all colleagues, we're all working in the same party, and I've often said that whether Mr. Kharge wins or I win, what matters is the victory of the party. The party has to come out of this stronger, refreshed and re-energized. I find, and I've argued for some time now, that internal elections, when they become public as this one has become, undoubtedly have a role in not just galvanizing the workers, but in drawing the interest of the electorate. The amount of interest that you in the media and our voters and the general public have shown in this election in the last couple of weeks is probably greater than the Congress party has received in the last 8 years. And that, to my mind, is a tribute to the leadership of the Congress party that had the courage and the imagination to conduct a free and fair election, and have done so rather ably and well.
मैं जो कैंडिडेट बना हूं, ये सभी ने मुझे एक तरह का प्रोत्साहन देके उन्होंने मुझे कैंडिडेट बना। मेरा मैनिफेस्टो वही है जो कांग्रेस का मैनिफेस्टो पहले था। जो मेरे ऑर्गेनाइजर्स हैं, जो मेरा प्रचार कर रहे हैं, अगर वो ठीक प्रचार करके लोगों को जमाते हैं तो क्या मैं ये कहूँ अरे आप मत बुलाओ किसको भी। बट दिस इज ए इलेक्शन प्रोसेस, दिस इज वी आर फाइटिंग डेमोक्रेटिकली एंड शशि थरूर इज आल्सो माय ब्रदर।
I'm crossing over to our senior editor, Pallavi Ghosh, to get us more details on this. Pallavi, while speaking exclusively to CNN News 18, one of the big key takeaways is that Tharoor really said that it's a contest not against Kharge, but against those who do not want you to win. So essentially, he's again talking about all of the mishaps and allegations of favoritism that he's been alleging over the last couple of days. How is this likely to be? Is it likely that the Congress High Command will respond to these allegations?
No, on record, the Congress party has maintained the line that there's been no preferential treatment. But, I think Shashi Tharoor's comments.
Hello and welcome to Now Showing. Madhuri Dixit says a thing this week that will bewilder you. A film that India has chosen to be represented in the Best Foreign Language category at the Oscars. Is it a copy of Cinema Paradiso? And directors of Family Man, The Hen and Mirzapur talk to me about the need for more content in the OTT space. All in the next 30 minutes. I'm Atika Farooqi. Let's begin with the highlights. Cello Show is a 1 in 100 film that you and your children must watch. Period. Madhuri Dixit and director Anand Tiwari talk very frankly on why was Madhuri cast in a subject that needs conversations. And directors of 3 popular web series, Family Man, The Hen and Mirzapur, on the demand and supply of content on the OTT space. To begin with, here is the review of Gujarati film Cello, which is now India's official entry to the Oscars in the Best Foreign Film category. Now, Greek philosopher Plato said, those who tell stories rule society. Pan Nalin's film Cello, the last film, is premised on this philosophy, as the dream of a little child to tell stories through light transforms an underprivileged boy into a reservoir of passion, fearlessness and leadership. I want to tell you 2 things in the beginning.